acknowledgement of, like I was just saying, I don't feel like I need to concentrate on the conversation about being sorry. I need to focus on the conversation about what can we do about it in the future and moving towards inclusion and incorporation.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to be a voice like that in today's society without sounding racist or without sounding like I don't care or insensitive.
Yeah.
And I don't care about pissing off majority of the Australians. I care about pissing off the Indigenous communities that I'm trying to help as opposed to anything else. So how does that come across in the Indigenous community?
Yeah, it's definitely, like you're saying, there's a lot of hesitation about how to communicate that or how to really put those actions in place to be able to move forward. So definitely, across the people that, I interact with and a lot of who I learn and hear off that, sorry has been said so many times for such a long time that, we talk about sorry means that you actually aren't going to do it again, or it's truly, if you're truly sorry, you try to really put those actions into place to not happen again. So rather than keep revisiting the word sorry that this has happened, sorry that has happened and everything, it's about, okay, let's acknowledge, definitely, take accountability, but then how do we really come together to start stepping forward, start to bring everyone together, learn more, join forces and start to put those actions in place and make those differences moving forward. So
it's and you just said a great thing, like sorry means that you won't do it again, but there's only so much of that conversation that you need to have. You know, if you're a child and your parents and you say sorry to your parents or you say sorry to your sibling or to a friend, you don't have to continue to say sorry every time you see them. And really what's needed is action taken in a new conversation. Past the conversation of sorry. That's the same type of role that I would take as being a father myself. Would be, I explain to my children what's sorry and why they might be sorry, and then we work out again, sort of learning from that. So then we can keep growing and create the behavior that you want to see. And that behavior needs to be inclusive of
definitely
everything.
Exactly right. It's like what we're talking about in regards to the conversations around reconciliation, NAIDOC, Sorry Day, all the significant events throughout the year, similar to what we discussed earlier. Now was it's not about those one-off events. That's probably still carrying on that conversation of sorry, so let's celebrate or recognise one particular thing, where rather than singling it out, it's about that everyday conversation and everyday action and every week action, every month, like you're saying.
It's like just part of our lives.
Part of the life, exactly right.
Instead of days or weeks with NAIDOC week, I think it's great that they have it. They have weeks for mental health. They have weeks for cancer. They have weeks for everything. They have a day for everything. And I think that it's great specifically and particularly I think that NAIDOC week is great for schools and for young, just being able to educate young people. Because they might not get that incorporation in their homes and the communities that they are in outside of schools. But I think NAIDOC is crucial for children. And I think every week, international or national recognised week is, because it's about bringing that awareness. Because, we didn't have anything like that when I was at school. I don't know how old you are, but I think I'm older than you. And we didn't have a NAIDOC week at school. But like I was saying to you before, I went to school in a very multicultural environment. And my own mother, people used to think that my own mother was Aboriginal because in summertime she goes really dark, and she does. She looks like she could be. But I remember people used to use really kind of like abo and stuff like that. Is your mum Bung? Is your mum abo? And all that kind of stuff. That was in the early 80s or late 80s. Those things these days, hell no. You don't say stuff like that.
Quite derogatory, definitely.
So I feel like it's come a long way, in not a long way, but I feel like I'm really glad that I don't hear my kids say anything like that. My kids have grown up with NAIDOC week at school, and it's a very different kind of attitude and conversation. So I feel like it might have taken 30 years to breed out that in the schools, and I'm sure it was there a lot longer, a lot earlier. But
Yeah, I've personally, faced racism definitely, and unfortunately in more recent times. But I definitely agree with you. I have started doing some teaching some culture in some schools,
Awesome.
and just of recent, and to see the progression that schools have come, definitely like you're saying in regards to like when I was at school. I was lucky enough that we did celebrate certain things at school, and it was really driven by only one particular teacher. Where now, it's definitely more in the forefront of, I think, teachers and the education department's mind. But yeah, definitely, I think, like you're saying, they're referencing all the other sort of days and weeks of the year. NAIDOC week is obviously very important. I had heard of an Aboriginal person saying when they were growing up, they actually called it themselves in their own families Black Christmas, because it was really one of the only times throughout the year that they really got to celebrate their Aboriginality and their Aboriginal culture.
Wow.
And I guess that's how we do look at NAIDOC week as Aboriginal people, is that this is the one day where we're really celebrated, commemorated as our culture and everything that we are.
It shines.
It really shines. There's lots of other days throughout the year. We've got the invasion days, the sorry days, and a lot of those days where they're more actually about acknowledging the past and the sorrows and the hurts. And
it's somber.
Yes, somber.
It's definitely not a celebration.
It's not necessarily a celebration. No, exactly. So, so it is very significant.
That's
NAIDOC
such
week.
a great point. Like, you just saying that right then, I've never thought about it, and I don't feel bad for that, but I feel sort of just sorry that I've been so ignorant, but that makes so much sense. That, like, I just had an eye roll moment, I'm sure, because it was like, wow.
Yeah.
These days that the Indigenous communities and the First Nations communities have assigned for them are days of not celebration.
No.
Wow. And it's such a white privilege.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm glad that you've been able to sort of already take something from the conversation, because that is, I guess, a point. Such important week, NAIDOC week, the celebration. Like we were saying, the number of other days throughout the year are more acknowledged for other reasons. So. Dating back, some of the first sort of NAIDOCs was around celebrating ourselves, but also taking an opportunity still to, push that sort of little bit of the politics around Aboriginal rights and stuff like that. So it needs to be kept in such an important time for everyone to take that opportunity. But at the same time, as we, bringing that conversation back to progression as well, it needs to be a day-to-day sort of lived, acknowledgement and recognition of Aboriginal culture and history and learning. So, it's good that, people and schools and everyone are taking the opportunity to put things together, and like you are now as well, which is great. Hopefully you can create and start more of a conversation on the daily and the weekly, times and stuff as well.
And so when you just mentioned that you've started to speak at some schools recently, how does that come about? Is that something that you approach the schools? Does the schools approach the elders in the community to sort of find that connection?
Yeah, so generally with schools, unfortunately still at the moment, I guess there's still conversations and work on that policy point in regards to getting more Aboriginal culture embedded into the curriculum. So what a lot of people have to do, a lot of other Aboriginal people, organisation and businesses have, in my case, one of my friends has created his own business around teaching culture to kids in schools, and has put that forward to what's called the AECG, which is an Aboriginal reference group. That's all sort of districts and locations around Central Coast and New South Wales. They have a number of these representing a group of schools, and so they sort of are a voice for Aboriginal sort of education in those areas.
So good.
Yeah, so they have representatives from the school and representatives from community can go to those, and have discussions about what should be being done in schools.
Someone said to me yesterday, just about a different topic, but someone said to me, if you can make it easy for the government, they really like that. So it sounds like your mates made it easy and said, look, just let me do it. which is great.
Yeah.
It's great for everything. You know, that conversation we were having was about mental health and about how having mental health conversations in schools, the government doesn't have, not only do they do not have the funds or the means to be able to do it, but they don't know how. They're not people of Indigenous background and culture, that they'd have no business teaching it.
Yeah. So yeah, it is really good that if you put a good business obviously plan together, and like you're saying, make it that it can either align with curriculum, be streamlined into sort of their daily or weekly, classes and processes at schools.
Easy.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier. And then what you need obviously off the back of that too is principals or teachers that are really supportive and see the value in it as well, because then they also have to be the one that drive it into incorporating into their school sort of daily routines and stuff. What we do also have is the Closing the Gap scheme and policy, which is a national government approach to reducing all the deficits in regards to Aboriginal people to non-Aboriginal people around life expectancy, education, employment, housing, a number of different points around that. So one of them being education. So there is a whole lot of funding towards increasing Aboriginal education in schools. So then schools do get extra funding now to be able to put towards people like myself coming in and teaching sort of culture into. So there is an extra incentive, which is nice and also a leg up. But we'd like it, obviously, the end goal is to just have it streamlined into the curriculum.
And for it not to be something that you have to beg for.
No.
Or to make it easy for.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when I was in high school, probably around year 10, maybe I want to say. So we're going back to the mid-90s. I remember there was a huge reform in schools because we all got asked to find out whether or not we were of Aboriginal descent, because the schools now were going to be receiving funding for excursions in the canteen and for books and things like that. And we had three, and I'll never forget, I went to a girls' school, so we had 3 girls that discovered that they were of a quarter or an eighth descent, and they received full benefits. But I would imagine that back then the school would have probably received the majority of that incentive to do that, and the child wouldn't really have received much of it at all, maybe just experience. But back then it was very much focused on money, as opposed to the fact that we want you to find out for your culture, we want you to find out for more inclusion. It was a money thing.
And that's definitely part of the conversation, sort of what you're also partly describing that resonates with me as being an Aboriginal person growing up and even to this day still being told that we benefit as an Aboriginal person by being Aboriginal in regards to money or funding or different things like that. It's like
me saying I benefit as a woman
it's
to
very
having
ridiculous.
children.
It's actually completely opposite. Like I said, in recent years I still get vilified for being an Aboriginal person. So it's what's the intent behind that sort of funding that's coming through. Is it actually truly being used to support and as I just mentioned about Closing the Gap, is it truly to support Aboriginal people, children, to be able to get the same type of education that non-Aboriginal people are getting, which some people maybe listening or not that don't know that I'm pretty sure it's around half. Only 50% of Aboriginal children complete, through to year 12.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's very, very low, and that ratio is across the whole of the country. So you'd obviously get a lot higher percentage in places, maybe particularly like where we are, Central Coast, because of the resources that we do have. But then we go into more remote places where travel and just a number of different factors come into play, where it could be extremely a lot lower. So if the schools, like I said, is driven by having a really good principals, some teachers, and then using that funding to really support all children, and on top of that, particularly Aboriginal children in particular ways, to have the correct resources, the correct people coming in and teaching, and everything that money can actually be used for. That's what it's truly there for, and that's what we're hoping sort of comes from that. And if NAIDOC Week, like in schools, I think the last 2 weeks of term and then the first 2 weeks of the next term, most schools will celebrate NAIDOC week. And in the schools that I've been into and my friend and a couple of people I know, that they got full day activities of teaching a lot of different things around dance, music, artifacts, cooking, art, like painting, a number of different things. And along with that is about teaching the connections and the stories and the understanding about what it actually all means, not simply like to, look at it and it looks nice. It's about the actual connection and meaning behind a lot of that sort of stuff too. So, yeah.
And can I just ask, in schools, for example, if you've got things like that happening, and obviously they're great, but what kind of and maybe it's different. Societies change and cultures change all the time in terms of how the elders of any community do things to how the modern people do things. Children who are not Indigenous or First Nations within a school picking up a didgeridoo or doing a dot painting or, doing the cultural dances. How do Indigenous communities or even just elders or parents of their children feel about the white kids participating in their thing?
So for me, a few of the elders that I've been sort of learning off, it's about, as Aboriginal culture, growing up, we know in Aboriginal communities, we know that the way to grow and to continue the stories and the education is by sharing. So without sharing, our knowledge will, not be. And that is what has happened. And we're having a good revitalization of our information, which is really good. So the people that I surround myself with are very supportive of sharing our culture to everyone for the right purposes and the right intent. So there's particular, sacred, obviously, information, sacred stories, songs and places that might be sacred for particular reasons that will only be shared to Aboriginal people. But as a whole, sharing our information, sharing our stories, is definitely encouraged and supported by a majority of the community. Because, like I said, we know by sharing all this, it will really bring everyone together. The more that everyone can understand, exactly, the more that everyone can understand and learn, it will reduce the prejudice or the injustices, will reduce a lot of that sort of stuff. Education's the key. So the more that we can educate and share our information, the better the outcomes would be. So
And social media has a huge handle on that too, which is great. Social media can be used for all kinds of purposes, but it's great for sharing messages with the membership with Sync. Predominantly it's over the internet. It's mostly virtual. We aim to be able to meet together, but people are everywhere. We're all spread out, but it's about sharing messages and sharing learnings and teachings and things that are sacred. So when it comes to your knowledge, when we start talking about spirituality and the Indigenous, what I know about it, and it is very basic, but what I know is that a huge part of the spiritual belief is that you are part of the land and the land is you, so you all share the one spirit. And anything that is in existence is alive with spirit. And I once heard an elder talk about how it was a lady kind of like me interviewing an elder, and she said, when I die, I believe that I go to heaven. I don't believe that it's heaven, but she said, I believe that I go to heaven. And he had a bit of a laugh, and he said, no, your spirit only ever goes as high as the bird flies. So what is there like a blanket kind of?
I think so. Similar, a few things that we've sort of shared and spoken about is what we need to sort of understand. I'll just backtrack one sec. So sharing is So sharing the right information is what is the important part. So helping educate people to understand what the right information is will help take away some of those uncertainty and maybe ignorant or naive sort of questions and approaches to certain things. So whether that's around language, stereotypes, misconceptions, and then off the back of that, tying that into what we're talking about now, is that across the whole of Australia, there was potentially over 500 different sort of mobs, clans, tribes of Aboriginal people. So what, as a blanket, my understanding from my learnings would be that as Aboriginal people, yes, we are one with Mother Earth. Earth is us, and we are Earth. It's sort of no separate. Mother looks after us, and we need to look after Mother. You never take more. You never than you ever need. You treat them because we are all one family. Mm-hmm. So Mother being everything that is alive around us and growing. But then if we go further, the way that maybe spiritual ceremony was done, or the story in regards to similar to what that elder shared around your spirit goes as high as the bird goes, that would potentially be what his people believe in.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's some story that I've heard around. So for me, so being Aboriginal man, my family's from Wiradjuri country, which is most of New South Wales inland, sort of central New South Wales, and then my clan is called the Binjane clan, which is from Wellington near Dubbo. What's sort of sacred to us is we have a lot of sacred meaning in regards to trees and a few different types of animals. So we could also believe that in our spirituality, that if we were to pass, then we would, our spirit might become into a tree or into a particular animal or certain things like that. So that type of thing. So obviously very similar across a lot of different groups in regards to where the spirit goes and how that is embodied, or whether it's in regards to a particular bird or a tree or a lake or whatever it may be. But yes, that and for us on East Coast and also into where my family's from, Wiradjuri, we do have a creator. We believe in a creator called Bayami, and we've got a number of different sort of beliefs around the importance of the sun for us and what that might mean, where we come from in regards to the stars and the ground, the rivers, a lot of different things like that.
So what does the sky and the stars and the night sky, what does that represent for you? What is that?
So learnings I've been told of a number of different people is that when the first fleet and first settlement come into Sydney, the question was asked to the Aboriginal people, where do you come from? And often they would point to the stars in the sky. And for a long time, obviously, they didn't understand what that was meaning. It's like, what are you talking about? So we believe that Bayami, our creator, came down from the night, and a story that has been told to me is he paddled his canoe down the Mirrabooka, the Milky Way, onto this land that we now call Australia, and created, with the help of his wife and his children, created the everything that we've got now. So the animals, the plants, the trees, the rivers, the mountains. Once he had created what he needed to create, he then stepped back off Mount Yango, which is out Wollombi way, and which is now a flat top mountain, and I believe it's a flat top mountain because Bayami stepped on it and created a flat top mountain and went back up into the stars. So that's why for us, stars are very significant. Stars can show us the way home to our gunyas, show us how to travel across the land to find what we need, to find our people, our animals, our food, all those sorts of things. Also the constellations that are shown now. So we've got the Milky Ways and the Southern Cross and a lot of those different things. Well, Aboriginal astronomy can show that there was like animals that we might see in the sky, and they can represent different things. So there's the Dinawan, the emu, and that will tell us as Aboriginal people the mating seasons, when it's travelling, sort of when it's time to hunt it, that sort of thing. And then a number of different animals. There's ones around the goanna, the guga, that can be seen in the sky, in the stars. Once again, so the stars, tell so many different stories. Depending on what you're looking for, what time of the season it is, and a number of different things like that.
And that changes generally from country to country?
Generally, across a lot of New South Wales, the understanding is that even though there are a lot of differences around dialects,
little details,
but a lot of similarities around, because to understand as Aboriginal people, we would travel depending on the seasons and travel depending on... so the seasons and the weather would tell us where we need to go, depending on, where sort of, feeding here and ceremony there and a lot of different things. How to use the land. So there was a lot of cross between a lot of the different clans and tribes would come together at a lot of different times of the year.
And do they work well together?
Yeah, so they would do things together, see? So there'd have to be also understanding of each other, even though they would be calling themselves different names.
And what about, like, whose country it actually is? There's these two clans arriving into one country, one mob's country.
But that's also the thing too, I guess, in modern day, contemporary Aboriginality and understanding is that there's been boundaries put on this sort of thing.
Right.
Where there wasn't necessarily as clear boundaries as there may be these days.
Oh.
Yeah. So
because it would have just been a human interchange, rather than rules and boundaries.
Yeah. So we had what was called law, LORE, which would govern sort of how we would live amongst each other.
Yeah.
And then
like
there
the
was
respect and things like that.
Yeah.
And the hierarchies and...
Yeah. But our boundaries are more around a tree, a river, a mountain.
Oh.
And so that would mean, like, when we cross that mountain...
You're now in their land.
Yeah, and you would have to, when you venture there, there would be a certain type of ceremony or process that you'd probably do when you move into those areas, rather than necessarily say, this is my land now, and blah blah blah, this is the rules. It would be but a lot of Aboriginal people would come together, similar to like a lot of understanding what we know around the world, around for trade, around for ceremony, potentially marrying, lots of different things like that. Yeah.
So what does your clan, or is it a clan or a mob?
Like those words are all fine, interchangeable.
Yep.
Yeah. So for me, I'm lucky enough to know that I've got the Wiradjuri, sort of tribe, and then we've got a clan group. So
is your clan like your family within the tribe?
So the clan, is a specific group of people within that tribe. Yeah, so Wiradjuri tribe as a whole, or the Wiradjuri country. So actually what we could think of it is, the way that I would explain it is that the continent of Australia, not the country, the continent of Australia is similar to somewhere like Europe or Africa or South America, where it's made up of a whole lot of countries. Mm-hmm. So the Wiradjuri country is this large group, large country area within the middle of New South Wales, and then within that country again, you've got lots of either regions or states or whatnot.
What happens? What is your belief that happens in terms of where your spirit comes from to be able to land in Jason May's body?
So that's definitely a journey that I've taken for myself. So my family, back every generation of my family has proudly identified as Aboriginal people, through my mum, through my mum's dad, through both his parents. We've got Aboriginality all the way through there. So, but actually understanding the significance and also understanding the connection to what being an Aboriginal person means is something that has only sort of happened to me and my mum and our family probably in the last sort of 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And I guess what comes with that is my feeling around that is, unfortunately, sometimes we need a significant thing to happen in our life to take more recognition or to take more, sort of have that
awareness.
Yeah, awareness around, oh wow, okay, this sort of means that. So for me personally, my country, like I was saying, is inland New South Wales. So a lot different to, like we're saying, the Central Coast, where we live now.
Yep.
But my connections and my spirituality feels a lot stronger, and I feel a lot more calm, and I feel a lot more connected actually here to the Central Coast.
Wow.
Because I've lived here for 30 years. I've grown up here.
Yeah.
I love going back to my family's country. I got married there because of the connections, and my grandfather and all the family are, buried there. So we still have a lot of that feeling inside us when we go there.
It's a part of you.
Yes. But where I'm so much at ease, like this morning doing meditation down at the beach, looking over the water, and going for the bushwalks that I do around here, on the cliff faces where I've got the water and the bush. That's where I really feel it. And for me now with my children and for me personally, in the mornings I do acknowledge and respect our sun that comes up for what the sun gives to us. The sun gives us life. Without the sun, we would not have life. We wouldn't have anything. Like I said, at night time, I talk to my kids about the stars.
Yeah.
Budu in my language is stars, and the significance of like all of what I explained before. So taking our feet off and standing in the water. Some of the story that have been told about the water is actually the mother's womb, and how it heals and rejuvenates life and Aboriginal people.
A different kind of life force to the sun.
Yes, different life force to the sun. All of those different meanings and significances to all the land around us now, and the sky and the waterways and everything. That's something that I've definitely connected with, and feel that's where I'm from, and where I'll go. And just in the last few weeks, we had to go back and bury a great uncle, Aboriginal great uncle, and it's always something that I guess my mother and I talk about now, and my sister, about
where's he gone?
Where's he gone? But also, what are we going to do, and how do we want to do our sort of ceremony and what it means to us, and for us, rather than being buried, we do want to be cremated. In regards to what smoke means for Aboriginal people around fireplaces, smoke, ashes, once again, spirit into the sky, a number of those different things. So
I love that.
Yeah.
And so that's, from what I'm understanding, then that's not a standard kind of conversation that happens in Indigenous families?
Well, I guess part of understanding that conversation is the impact on our culture. So when white settlement come to Australia, it was generally the missions, the schooling, the force of belief was in regards to Anglican, Christian, Catholic. So the beliefs of all of that. Yep. So there is a strong tie of those beliefs in Aboriginal communities.
Filtered through, like almost infiltrated and stained, if you will, and you can't get what was original back.
Yeah. So there's, now a mixture, I guess, of the Aboriginal way and beliefs coming back, and the language and the spirituality and everything coming back into our culture. But there's also a strong, still, belief around
mainstream
belief systems. You know, and there's obviously a lot of respect to that because of what, you know, a lot of people needed in those times and were forced to believe in, and the way that people dealt with getting through life as well.
Got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. So, yeah, I couldn't really answer that question with a yes or a no, but just that some context around where some... Because that's what we're talking about is my mum. My mum grew up going to... I'm not sure if it's Catholic or Christian school, but with all those
organised
beliefs,
tradition, religion. Yeah.
So those conversations in our household are definitely happening around what it more means to us and what we connect with and what we believe in. And
so you share what you believe in now with your children, and that's kind of the influence that you're having on them.
Yeah. So I have 5 children.
Yep.
My older 2 don't live with me full time, so they go to a public school. But the elder daughter that lives with me is now in kindergarten. And in regards to what we've talked about earlier around education, closing the gap, we're lucky enough that she actually goes to one of the large private schools in Sydney, because they have a system in place now where they extremely subsidise education for Aboriginal children, to increase the amount of Aboriginal children being able to get, like we said before, a great education.
Finish school.
Yes, all of those sorts of things. But their school is also Anglican. So I have, through the process of that, spoken to, the principals and that sort of stuff around my beliefs and what I teach my children. But also what I am very much open to in my household is for my children and my family, obviously, to learn everything that this wonderful world has to offer. Embrace. As well. Yeah. And so that's part of it. So they do get the learning of Anglican through their religious classes. But she's in an Aboriginal campus, so they also get local Aboriginal elders and people coming in also talking to them about our Aboriginality.
That's
and
awesome.
They also get me at home speaking about it as well. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. So I have a friend whose 4 children all were able to go through a similar situation to what your daughter is going through in kindergarten with the school. So they were able to go to private boys' school and a private girls' school, and through their pathways, they went into sports. So their father was a first grade player of an Indigenous descent. And all the children, there's 3 boys and 1 girl, and so all the boys were basically destined to travel in that same sporting, and so the school was able to provide the pathways for them to do that in a way that allowed them to have their education but also be good at sport. So when it comes to sports and Indigenous communities and First Nations, like my 2 oldest children, our boys, they've played soccer, football, like league. The eldest is now playing union, and in the league situation, it's and this is so bad that I don't think it's bad, but when I was growing up at my school, like I was one of the only Aussies, and they used to say spot the Aussie, and I was the one that was on the back end of like, I'll spot the Aussie, there's the blonde Aussie over there kind of thing. On a football field, it's kind of like that these days because it is such a huge contingency of First Nations exist inside of football, which is wonderful. But how important is that sports pathway, and have you seen that has really changed the game, almost, excuse the pun, for your communities as well? Because Indigenous communities are just really gifted with sport, and maybe it's because it's that animalistic approach as well, because I know that that's within you, and you just move different, you're faster, you're more agile, it's just you move with swiftness. It's different watching an athlete that's First Nations to watching a white Australian athlete. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. I'm involved in rugby league myself as well, and I do know that through rugby league, now that especially in the NRL, that's not obviously in our grassroots and kids levels, but it's 50% is at least Pacific Islander and Aboriginal. So yeah, a massive group in that space now, and yeah, obviously there's genetic makeup that changes. That has an impact and influence in regards to Aboriginal people and a lot of other nationalities being able to be in that space, and that there is a lot of different. What's really good through a lot of sporting organisations now, we've got the AFL, we've got the soccer, rugby union, rugby league, cricket, a lot of those pathways there. Netball, basketball, we know basketball actually with Paddy Mills leading the way a lot in that way as well. A lot of pathways about going and giving Aboriginal people an opportunity in those spaces to first off use their natural talents to step into those spaces, and then once they've been able to, lucky enough, use their natural talent to step into those spaces, be afforded the opportunity that comes with that as well around off the back of that, there might be an education, it might be health, it might be simply financial, which we understand in this world that we live in now, financial is needed. But yeah, I think being recognised as, gifted in our athletic ability is absolutely wonderful. But then we also have the other conversation where rather we don't necessarily also want to be only pigeonholed into athletics and being given the opportunity to be, acknowledged and recognised in everything that we bring. Yes, definitely being, what's the word around, celebrated for what we're achieving, and how many wonderful athletes have paved the way for us in the past too, and really being able to use their status to drive awareness in a number of different ways.
And
exactly
to be
right.
a role model as well.
Yeah, massive role models.
Yeah,
all of those sorts of things for sure is massive and such needed. Sometimes we need to see these, or all the time we need to see these people to give us some belief and inspiration.
Yep.
And then like I'm saying, off the back of that, like similar, like my youngest elder daughter, I say it that way. That's how I describe them all. She's actually really gifted in her athletics too. Like she's come first in her running events and certain things at school. But then on the other flip side too, something that we really drive and for me is so important around is education. And so her education at school is actually, she's really good at as well, and something that we should say is so important that...
like she might want to be a scientist,
or an inventor, exactly right,
or an artist, or a singer, or anything.
It could be anything. It could be anything. So all of that, encompassing is wonderful, and so many platforms for that these days too, which is great.